Robert's having with the might need IT help. Sorry. Send me a text.
You are live.
Okay, thanks, Mr. Kovacs. And if we can just contact Councillor Thompson, see if we can help him get in, that would be great. In the meantime, I'm sure we can just go through the first few procedural pieces of tonight's general committee meeting. I will call the general committee meeting to order, although I do want to wait for the clerk. I just want to make sure that Ms. Cook is good. You good?
We're good, thank you. Sorry.
All right, no worries. Okay, I'll call the general committee meeting to order. Tonight's general committee meeting is being held virtually with members of general committee, the executive management team, and the clerk participating via video conference tonight. The members of the senior leadership team who have reports on tonight's agenda are not visible but available to answer questions. And tonight, because we just have the one item on the agenda, that includes the staff who have supported the Performing Arts Task Force. We will run through the consent agenda for the two actually items that are on tonight's agenda. They are both council items, not staff reports. If the item is not held, it's deemed to be approved on consent. There'll be no further discussion tonight. The item will go forward to council next week for final approval. Two items on tonight's agenda. First is the Performing Arts Center Task Force. If somebody could just hold that for me pending the presentation. Councillor Kungle, saw your hand first. Thank you. And then the second one is an item for discussion placed by Deputy Mayor Ward. It's a request to the province for community reintegration officers for the Central North Correctional Center. Does anyone wish to hold that item? Seeing none, that is approved on consent. Thank you, Deputy Mayor Ward. Okay, tonight then we just have the one presentation and it is concerning a Performing Arts Center Task Force update. So I will just ask our staff to bring the members of the task force who are making tonight's presentation into the call. And while they're doing that, I will ask Councillor Jim Harris, who did absolute yeoman's work over the past many months, many meetings, subcommittee meetings, main committee meetings, all of those things in leading this task force. Jim, do you have any opening comments you want to make before we hand it over for the presentation?
Thank you, Mayor Lehman. And yeah, and thank you first and foremost to council for giving us the direction to put this task force together. And tonight, I know you've received two memos to date and a final report along with this presentation of the work that's been done. And, you know, it's been an absolute pleasure to chair. And I must say that there's been a lot of work done, and I'll have thank yous at the end, but definitely Councillor Rietma and Councillor Thompson have been along for every step of this journey and have done an incredible amount of work contributing to this effort. And I'm seeing Chuck and Julie pop on screen, so it's great to see their friendly faces. And on behalf of all of the task force, who put in a lot of work. I'm very pleased that tonight, all the information that you have in front of you, the meaning to it will be provided by Chuck and Julie. So with that noted, without further ado, the stars of this show are not me, it's Chuck Verten and Julie Underhill who will work you through the presentation, and we look forward to providing this to you. Thank you very much.
Well,
Chuck and Julie, welcome to General Committee. Sorry, and we will hand it over to you. I don't know if, is there a screen share or just, are you just speaking to us tonight?
there are slides that will be put up by Carl.
Okay, perfect. All right, well, I'll turn it over to you, Chuck and Julie. Go ahead.
Mayor Lehman and members of council, I'm Chuck Rattan, and this is my colleague, Julie Underhill. And we are members of the Barrie Performing Arts Center Task Force. And next slide, please. Our mission was to advance the planning to replace Georgian and Fisher, and by the way, look 50 years down the road. Well, Barrie's population will double by 2051, and that's only 30 years away. Fisher and its 980 seats is gone. Georgian, with its 680 seats, is only a temporary fix. That's a total of 1,660 seats, which are being lost. We also lost almost 800 seats at the Imperial Cinemas, where the Barrie Film Festival was an anchor tenant, and we lost 400 seats at Central United Church. Churches are often used by local groups as rehearsal and performance venues. The overall loss is 2,460 seats. So what did we do? We got input from community groups. We visited 4 performing arts centers. We listened to their managers who said they should have built more seats. We got more than 1,000 responses to a survey, and we determined we needed a professional fundraiser. Next slide, please. We had an opera house in 1896 with 1,200 seats. Fisher opened in 1962, and Georgian Theatre opened in 1973. The Barlow study recommended 3 spaces, with the largest being 1,200 seats. The culture plan proposed a total of 5 spaces. The question we sought to answer was, what do we do now? Next slide, please, and Julie.
Another opening, another show in Philly, Boston, or Barrie's core. So is there an excitement for the arts in Barrie? And is there a need for this new center linked to our downtown? The response on both accounts is yes. Next slide, please. The 2016 Ontario Arts Council General Survey found that 93% of Ontarians believe that arts activities help enrich the quality of our lives. 90% agree that the arts experiences help bring people from diverse backgrounds together as a community. And 97% agree that engaging children in the arts is important to their overall development. Whether experienced together as a family, a friend group, or a class of students, there is nothing that can replace the in-person experience and engagement of being part of a larger audience that feels the exhilaration of something special and unique in an arts presentation. Next slide, please. As outlined in your final report, number 10, the task force divided into working groups to streamline our work. While working group 1 researched user groups and building scope, working group 2 and 3 focused on community engagement feedback and developing marketing and communications messaging to obtain community support. Our survey put out by the task force had high engagement and overwhelming support of response in a new center, including the fact that 1/3 of the participants left their contact information and 137 are interested in supporting future fundraising. Next slide, please. The PAC Task Force survey found that those who responded wanted to participate or attend a wide variety of arts presentations at the new center. The top 7 selections are listed here. Support the need that the facility is designed to accommodate that breadth of performance and presentation needs, both for local performers and the community participants and audiences. The center needs to be for everyone. It needs to be for all types of entertainment and entertainers. Country performances, pop, rock, classical, folk, film, comedy acts, interactive workshops, and more. Next slide. Canadian youth are avid participants in the arts. This results in engagement for entire families. Our survey also demonstrated similar results with the high desire to engage in the arts in Barrie. However, more than 60% of respondents felt that a lack of facilities to support arts and cultural activities prevents them from participating. Specific comments focused on the lack of a large venue to host various concerts and events and seating requirements. Next slide. Barrie arts organizations give countless hours back to the community, improving the health and well-being of others and contributing to the civic pride and vibrant city. supporting over 50 organizations like the Food Bank, Christmas Cheer, Hospice, Seniors Homes, Farmers Market, Winterfest, and more, bringing performances to people who cannot get out, or volunteering a performance for an organization's event. There are thousands of volunteer hours that are given in our community every year. This is a hobby and a recreational choice for many community members of all ages, whether they are a performer, an usher, or a volunteer in the countless tasks behind the scenes. Next slide. So the task force first recommendation focuses on the scope of the facility. The first part of the facility is the main theater of 800 plus seats based on the 2019 community consultation recommendations and continues to be recommended in 2021 by community user groups. The technical and stage requirements are comparable to the other facilities that we viewed in our task force visits and our continued dialogue and research. Next slide. Continuing on with this facility, the Performing Arts Center should have multiple spaces, including a second performance space of 350 seats and a multi-purpose space. Including a second theater space will help replace the seats lost at both Georgian and Fisher, as we would lose the 680 and 980 respectively. A facility with 2 presentation areas means that we will continue to provide a downtown home for the Barrie Film Festival with its large audience numbers and educational programming. It would be a considerable economic hit to downtown businesses to lose that film festival. And Barrie would be able to host large events and festivals that require multiple spaces for presentations, workshops, and marshalling. Next slide. In a sampling of 18 Barrie user groups, the following data was generated. This represents potential rental requests in a single year. To compare with the 115 days of bookings at Georgian College in 2000 and Georgian Theatre in 2019, there are an additional requests of 43 bookings for the large theatre, and then adding approximately 300 requests for the 2 other spaces. In this survey, there were 459 rental requests with 129 days of 2 or more rentals going on. This does not include many other community performance groups, cultural organizations and celebrations, dance competitions, countless number of music studios, Barrie Music Festival, Winterfest and Blues Festival, Choral Fest, Ontario Vocal Festival, and the list grows. Next slide. Barrie Performing Arts and other community presentation groups already bring a large audience to the new center. We are starting with a base of over 55,000 annually, with a variety of programming and a substantial offering of educational program. Still to factor in are the opportunities for audience growth and retention with visiting touring groups and city programming for the Performing Arts Center. Next slide, please, and I'll turn it back to Chuck.
The survey told us that Barrie residents leave town for over 40% of their performance choices. The top 2 locations are the GTA and Orillia. Orillia has a population of 30,000 and an opera house that accommodates 675 people. Sojourn, a Barrie company, now sponsors the Banff Film Festival in Orillia, and it sells out. Our own Theatre by the Bay did some shows in Orillia this fall because Georgian Theatre was closed. The survey says the main reason our residents go elsewhere is the quality of our arts and cultural facilities. And they spend $127 elsewhere. That's 40,000 people spending $127, which equals $5 million. Getting half of that back is $2.5 million for Barrie's downtown businesses. Remember that 65% of Ontario business leaders say a thriving arts and culture scene attracts top talent, and the same percentage of skilled workers agree that a great arts and culture scene is something they would look for when considering a move. Next slide, please. In slide 15, have a look at the size of the culture industry's amount, $26.7 billion. The performing arts GDP plus cinema ticket sales amounts to 1.25 billion of that figure. 75% of that amount is performing arts and the rest is cinema ticket sales. This is big business. Next slide, please. This chart shows you the increase in size of the audiences at the Burlington Performing Arts Center since its inception in 2012. This is one of the centers we visited. In 2019, the audience had increased to 122,000. The note from the 2014 annual report indicates the economic impact was 7.8 million then. In 2019, 75% of the patrons spent money supporting local restaurants. They spent 2.1 million in the downtown core when attending performances. Barrie Arts Alliance sample audience plus additional groups is already 45,000. We expect a similar increase in audience sizes like Burlington. In addition, instead of our audiences being located in the north end at Georgian Theatre, they'll be downtown to spend their money there. Next slide, please. TREAM stands for Tourism Regional Economic Impact Model. This is an Ontario government model that Cobalt Connects utilized in 2016 to provide a GDP calculation for an audience of 43,000. You can see the effect there on the various spending categories to a total of 4 million. According to Novita, in their 2020 report, the new audience could be 100,000 or more. Next slide, please. It takes 5 years to build the Performing Arts Center from today. Then a short 15 years later, the population will have climbed to 250,000 people. That's a phenomenal population growth, but that's what's predicted. The over 55 demographic is increasing the fastest. It's expected to double in 30 years. Arts and culture is their favorite pastime or hobby. As you know, a majority of over 55-year-olds reside in the downtown core. The PAC's ability to be a hub for performances, competitions, festivals, workshops, and events will have a significant economic impact. Next slide, please. So the PAC is of a significant economic benefit, has a strong community audience already, and exists in a large secondary catchment area, which consists of the townships surrounding Barrie, such as Innisville, Oro, Springwater, and so on. Next slide, please. This slide shows the construction cost of the 4 theaters that we visited at the time of their construction. It also compares their relative sizes. HPA is Hariri Pontarini Architects, and their estimate was made regarding the development of Fisher. We don't know the full cost of the new Performing Arts Center at this time, and the square footage needs to be calculated. We look forward to having an architect experienced in theater construction provide that information in the next phase. Next slide, please, and over to Julie.
As mentioned earlier, this recommended facility is comparable to the 4 locations that members of the task force toured. Given Barrie's population now, it is an appropriate size and versatile for the needs of the community. This is a facility that is for the entire population of Barrie. It can manage multiple presentations at the same time. And staff reports have indicated a total of approximately 500 parking spaces to support the site, comprised of on-site, adjacent lots, and short walking distance. This facility creates opportunities for additional weekday, daytime rentals for corporations, meetings, and breakout presentation spaces. This brings additional revenue to the 3 spaces in the center, as well as driving more economic impact to downtown businesses. Next slide, please. In addition to outlining the recommended scope of the Arts Center, the task force also recommends support of the Cobalt and Novita reports for the design and fitment to be reviewed to improve the performance capability of the Five Points Theatre. It also recommends to retain professional assistance in fundraising effort, to procure an architect experienced in design of professional performing arts spaces with access to an experienced acoustic engineer, and beginning the fund application process for capital infrastructure grants from provincial and federal sources. Next slide, please. So in conclusion, we would like to emphasize that there was a comprehensive collection of data assembled by the task force, a lot of deep data from 19 community organizations, high response from the survey, and the viewing of 4 facilities. The community needs a facility that serves a wide variety of arts offerings and its participants. It is a recreation center for audiences, performers, and volunteers. We no longer build single one-use ice rinks in our city. We build recreation centers that have multiple pads, multiple spaces for different arts, because we know it's a good use of space and facility, and the arts is very similar. All our residents will benefit as the center becomes a major community hub that talented Barrie residents will love to perform in, audiences will love to visit, and that will be an amazing landmark and access for the city generally. I'd like it to go to the next slide and turn it back to our task force chair, Councillor Harris.
Great. Thanks, Julie, and thanks, Chuck, for putting meaning to the information that's been gathered by the group. It's really been a great team effort, and I have the pleasure of thanking people, and it's really can't thank people enough. And it begins obviously with our 2 councillors, Councillor Robert Thompson and Councillor Claire Riepma, again, who took a leadership role and were there at every step of the journey. The members of our committee include Angela Baldwin, Scott Boyer, Chris Fernando, Marshall Green, Tanya Gregor, Greg Groen, Wayne Hay, Graham Knight, Josephine Martinson Hempstead, Barry Peacock, Chuck Rattan, and of course, Julie, who presents us tonight. It's really been a great effort, and I look forward to the questions from council, the interest, and again, thank council for their effort along the way. We've had this Performing Arts Center come across our lens a few times. We had the report that recommended that the former Fisher not be renovated, and we had the theater reserve item come before us, and also, again, the task force request to get the group together to start keeping momentum going and move forward with this effort. So with that said, I welcome members of council to ask questions of the presenters and those members of council who've taken part in this work, and there's also some staff. And before I stop, I'll just want to say again, there's thank yous, and staff have been incredible. So I want to note, and some of the staff, obviously them in their departments, and so please send this thank you to your staff group, but Stephanie Schlichter, Rob Bell, Rick Pews, Susan Rocky, Nina Brand, Cassio, thank you so much. You've been incredible, and we are grateful for all you put into this work on behalf of the committee. Thank you very much.
All right, thank you so much, Councillor Harrison, and especially Chuck and Julie for the presentation. Tons of content in the report, tons of content in the presentation, and the enthusiasm and passion for the project comes through in everything you guys have done. So we really appreciate you being here, and I will turn it over to members of General Committee who may have questions. I think I saw Councillor Natalie Harris first. Go ahead.
Thank you, through you, Mayor Lehman. Thank you so much for the presentation. Wow, amazing work. Especially the hands-on that you went to tours and you looked at all of those places. Like, that's what I call research. That's great. My question is, of course, you know, with COVID and restrictions and lockdowns and all those things, you didn't mention what kind of discussion has been happening around that, with concerns of how many people can go and see theater shows, etc. right now?
I'm happy to take that. I think, it's a great point. One thing we do know, obviously, this won't be built. I'm hoping COVID's over tomorrow. That's my wishful side. I know it won't be, but certainly the restrictions as it relates to gathering are opening, and our community will continue to be further able to gather. But what we've learned in the pockets of time where COVID restrictions have been less restrictive is people wanted to gather, and getting together for theater, for arts, for music has happened very quickly. And we've actually had some incredible contributions from the arts community. The Barrie Music Group has formed over this to create, again, the access to music for people who haven't been able to gather to go to festivals during this time. So we do know that we're in a time now where access to live performance is very limited, but we do know that there's a great bottled enthusiasm to be able to do those things. And so we know this will be built. It takes time to build a theater. I think it's a 5-year. I can look to Mr. Hughes maybe to confirm that, but you're talking about a 5-year project from beginning to end. So we will be well past this current reality when this thing opens the doors for opening night. So thank you. I hope I answered your question, Councillor Harris.
Yeah, no, that's a great point. Thank you. Yeah, I have tickets to go see the Toronto Symphony with my son in February. I'm crossing my fingers. It's going to go forward. I get it. We really miss it. And I'm so looking forward to something like this in Barrie for sure. Thanks for your hard work.
Thanks, Councillor Harris. Councillor Kungle.
Thank you, through you, Mayor Lehman, to Councillor Harris, members of the committee, Mr. I lost my notes. Rutten and Miss Underhill. Well-deserved compliments across the board to all. This is really exciting. I did have one question. You didn't leave a lot to ask because it was so comprehensive. So from an economic impact to resident engagement and response to considerations around comparators, exceptional job. My only question really is, and I'm not sure if you can speak to it, but knowing that you've proposed an intention for a primary and a secondary site with different seating numbers, and knowing that we've got some high demand needs for theater and the performing arts, do you see potentially there to be a promotion? So when we talk a bit about the next 5 years, the theater being complete, all things considered, would we see that the preference would be looking at the design where we could get one of those two theater spaces up and running before the other, so we could open the doors and start to actually look at welcoming individuals if there's a phased approach to the theater? Or do you see it more of a compacted integrated model? I'm not sure if you can speak to that. That's way down the line around design, but I didn't know if those were ever part of considerations around balancing the next 5 years with demand, or are we more likely looking at an all-in-one, opening the doors, one big ribbon cutting, or would we see the ongoing work and conversation being trying to look at access to some component of the theater sooner than later?
Mayor Lehman, that might be, and I really appreciate the enthusiasm behind that question, so that, can we get going some of it earlier than later? I'm wondering if far as operation expertise, that might be something that maybe staff might be able to speak to. Is that even possible? It's beyond my scope of understanding, Councillor Kungle, but I don't know if we have Mr. Hughes or Mr. Bell on who might be able to answer. Is that even possible?
Mr. Bell, why don't you take first crack at that? And then Mr. Hughes might want to talk about the construction aspects of all at once or a phased build.
Yes, thank you, Mayor. And through you to the councillors and to Councillor Kungle's question. Operationally, we certainly would love to look at phase opportunities. I think we'd have to look at the design and whether it be a possibility of doing one and then another piece. We know that construction, while something is operating, is always difficult, and it comes with its own challenges, dust and sound and all of the different aspects. But the one key thing about a performing arts center such as this is that the performing arts center and the stage itself is only one component of all of the theater aspects that go on within that space. So you've got dressing rooms, hallways, loading docks, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. So it'd have to be part of the design that you'd understood that it was going into a phased approach. And Rick might be able, Mr. Hughes might be able to answer more of that, but I think that would be something we'd have to look at in the future.
Mr. Hughes?
Yes, thank you for the question. I agree with Mr. Bell. I mean, anything is possible if you spend enough time and effort and plan around it, but it's certainly not recommended. I mean, if you're trying to construct something well, especially in an environment like this where you need, quiet and silence, I think it would just be terribly disruptive to try and do. So I think a better focus would be to kind of plan it and, kind of get it all done in one shot.
Councillor Kungl? Oh, still on mute.
Thank you. Because I'm looking at the recommendations about other sites still to look at. So around the functionality of, I think the theater downtown, around being an incubator. So wondering about what council should appreciate between now and the next 5 years in our capital or in ongoing funding, as we did this year, to support Georgian theater continuing. And so it'd be interesting to see if the promotion is really looking at a 5-year opening, what do we need to set aside and what takes priority around ensuring there's some capacity ongoing that we're mindful about around continuing to create access to theater capacity in the performing arts. Are there other recommendations that might come forward afterwards when there's a bit more of a timeline and a forecasting out of the next 5 years around where this task force would like to see the city try and keep existing spaces possible or create more access in the interim? Or is that kind of outside the mandate of the task force and would be a different conversation with council in next upcoming budget and out years?
Yeah, I can take that if that's okay, Mary. Yeah, great question. And it's to answer your question, it's outside of the task force mandate, but not outside of all the arts community interest as far as moving forward. So absolutely on the radar. And as we know, very shortly after the decision to accept the recommendation to demolish the fissure, our arts community came forward and said, hey, and then we had the recommendation from George and recognizing they had some plans that didn't really fit well with our need for theater. Council took action. So, so I think that it still holds true that as we await the future of the Performing Arts Center and the plan moves forward, that there is an adequate amount of facilities for the community to both provide the art and for those to go enjoy the performing arts. So yes, 100%. It will be on the Barrie Arts Alliance. It'll be on their radar that we have the facilities as we await a new facility. I don't know if that's fair, Chuck or Julie, if you wanted to weigh in. Is that from your perspective as an Arts Alliance members, what the expectation would be of council to keep the show on, so to speak?
For sure. It is a really important question to the performing arts groups, and certainly keeping Georgian open and having that being able to transition, having a space to perform over the next 5 years is important for many groups that are currently using it as their main space. Without it, it is very hard to stay alive and functioning over the next 5 years while we're waiting. So we very much appreciated the move by council to re-engage with Georgian, and we are all anxious and looking forward to moving back in there.
Thank you, and I have no further follow-ups.
Great, thanks, Councillor Kungl. Councillor Morales, and then Councillor Harvey.
Thank you for the presentation. I'll echo very, very detailed and very confidence building. My question to you is, how can you double your fundraising goals for this project? Or how could we, as a municipality, help you fundraise your targets over this project? It's a very pointed question. Take it wherever you will.
That's a great question, and I like the enthusiasm and
Yeah.
that we can double our fundraising, because I don't think Councilor Thompson disagrees with you. Councilor Thompson, did you want to talk about the fundraising? Because one of the key things, Councilor Morales, and it's in the report, and you would have, as you know, is we have to have a design and a few more things before we can really get out there and actively fundraise. So I'll let maybe Councilor Thompson carry the ball from here.
Thanks through you, Mayor Lehman, to Councilor Morales. 100%. So in the report, it states that professional fundraisers should be hired. And so like Councilor Harris had said, that a design and a concept, and that needs to take place before you can actually go and start the ramping up fundraising. So one thing I will say though, in the survey, 300 and I could be wrong, 76 participants asked to be contacted to help with the fundraising on top.
Wow.
So, and like I said, Julie or Chuck would be able to confirm that number. They have that data in front of them. But so to be honest right now, Councilor Morales, the enthusiasm from council moving forward with this report is really what we can do today to show, you know, partners and community that this is something that's needed and wanted in our community, which I think is the greatest start to a fundraiser, when there's this energy around the people who make decisions. And it just puts such a positive spin on it.
I appreciate the response. And then I guess where I asked the question is, I remember Mayor Lehman a couple of years ago, very passionately, like it was one of his most passionate, wearing his heart on his sleeve and still objective at the same time, saying the community will respond to this. They will rise up. You don't know that, you know, you don't underestimate the Barrie Central community, et cetera, et cetera. I remember being in that room, and that's the enthusiasm I want. Unrelated, but related. I've been seeing commercials on TV for the Scarborough Hospital, if anybody has seen them, you know, X number of population, but they only get 2 or 3% of the fundraising. And then it's very Scarborough, like they own it, and the graphics and the feeling, it evokes an emotion. That's what I remember from that fundraising. Now, I'm not saying go in and get commercials. What I'm getting at is that kind of passion. RVH was stellar when I was growing up with the I Believe campaign. Like everybody has different strengths. So that kind of skill set, because for me, you know, I'm not against the Peter. What I do have concerns, and I've expressed them in the past, and I hope people are clear the difference between I supported theater to fundraising, and I will turn this into a question, is the money is the important thing. And I've heard from Mr. Hughes that obviously we once we kind of commit to the infrastructure, we got to go. But I'm wondering, I guess, to yourself, Councillor Harris, or any of the other deputants, how much can we capture from, what's the word, ambassadors of the community, leaders of industry, philanthropists beyond Barrie? There's a lot of people in Oromodonte, in Utopia, in ESSA, those rings, maybe as far north as Aurelia and Collingwood, and as far south as probably touching, you know, Everett, that might really benefit from bringing these people to the table. Like, is the intent to, once we get to that stage, put together almost a recruitment committee for those leaders of industry and philanthropists?
Yeah, I'll start, and happy to if members wanted to join in. Absolutely, Councilor Morales. There's recognition that this is a facility that will be the benefit the area, not just Barrie, and 100% that reach would be important part of the effort. And one thing, you know, things happen, and sometimes you don't know if it's a positive until you experience it. But and I'm happy to have Chuck or Julie add more detail. But one of the positives of this happening is the Barrie Arts Alliance coming together as a collective to really work together in a coordinated fashion to move this effort forward. So, you know, our arts community is well connected and coordinated, and the reach is significant. So there is lots of reach and capacity to make those contacts. And really, to your point, I agree with you. I know Councillor Thompson put his hand up for the fundraising piece, but that we could really do an incredible job of fundraising because there is such interest and such reach. So I don't know if Chuck or Julie, you wanted to talk about, the reach of the Barrie Arts Alliance and the arts community in Simcoe.
Chuck, go ahead,
Well,
Chuck.
I think I think Councillor Morales is right, and this sort of thing it becomes like a ball rolling down a hill. More and more people become involved. In particular, there are the surrounding townships where there are a lot of people who will enjoy coming in and experiencing this. And you don't really know until you get it going. I mean, of course, we have a 30-30-30 funding potential. So that's 30 from the province, 30 from the feds, and of course the municipality. That means you only have to find another 10%. And I think there is tremendous potential simply because of the very wide appeal of the arts. So I'm very confident, very optimistic about the things that could happen here.
Perfect. Ms. Underhill, sorry, I think I cut you off.
Sorry, that's Councillor Morales. I would also just mention that it was one of the questions we asked of the 4 sites that we visited as well, and those facility managers. They have a lot of expertise to share, suggestions, best practices. And I will say as well that 2 of those sites surpassed their funding plan, their fundraising plans in that preparation for their build. So they had great response to it, met it or surpassed it as well. And so we can definitely continue to speak with them and learn from them as we move forward.
Okay, perfect. And thank you. I think, leveraging those high value philanthropists and ambassadors is going to be huge, especially as we emerge out of COVID and people are going to be looking for monies to go into housing of all sorts and other things that might be seen as higher order priority for a complete community. We need all these. Those are all the questions, Mayor Lehman. I did want to, in one sentence, just thank Councillor Reitman, Councillor Harris. Around the time that we were talking about this, I'd actually answered one of the Barrie Today questions saying, I want a future where we just call each other and follow up on that. And Councillor Reitman did exactly that. Within 24 hours on a Sunday, he said, "Hey, you weren't too enthusiastic about the theater yesterday. Let's talk." It was extremely productive talk. So, and Councillor Harris, I know you and I talked this week, a couple of days ago. So great leadership on the community, obviously not just the councillors, but everybody else, and taking somebody like me who was a little bit more hard-headed a month and a half, 2 months ago, and really seeing that different perspective. So let's double that fundraising goal. Thanks, guys.
Thanks, Councillor Morales. Councillor Harvey.
Thank you, Mayor Lehman, and thanks for the presentation. It was quite detailed, and I do like the proposed funding formula because it does spread it amongst several levels of government, opposed to just really putting an onus on our local taxpayers. So I hope you have success in attaining those splits. I guess my first question would be in relation to theater trends. Now, obviously, we see our young, things have really changed. You can't even get them out of their rooms when it comes to playing games or YouTube, that type of thing. Is there any studies available that will show what the trends of theater use will be over the next 10 or 20 years as our demographics change?
Yeah, I'm happy to start. Maybe I can pass along. So much information, Councillor Harvey, and one thing we may not have detailed was the understanding of streaming and entertainment, gaming, those kind of things. And those clearly are emerging entertainment avenues. So gaming is really getting big, esports. So these are all forward-looking capacities that we recognize would be able to be utilized at this site. So that is part of the calculation. Again, it doesn't, and I don't have a study per se, and I don't know if there's something that others may have to join in, but definitely the interest in gathering to watch theater and music and dance, and we did talk about the large audience, the large interest in dance is incredible. So that in of itself, when we talked, I remember being at the Richmond Hill Theater visit, and they talked about how much they could just fill the place with dance at certain times of the year. It's an incredible community as well. So, and dance is something that is live and people come to see and experience. So I don't know if there's anything else, Chuck or Julie, you want to add related to future uses and the theater, the emerging avenues of performing arts modalities. But if you want to go ahead, Julie, I see you live up. That's great. Thank you.
Sure. Just to mention a few, we had so much data to draw on because we worked with so many participants and organizations. But and I realize sometimes it feels like youth are always, maybe tucked in at home or not outside. But I will say that we have over 50 private studios, music studios in Barrie alone, and all those instructors have dozens of students. And so it just continues to grow. That's an awful lot of kids participating in private music lessons. We have dance studios going on and theater studios. I know that for the organization I'm part of, Kempenfelt Community Players, our last live production, our youth show at Georgian Theatre, we had over 5,000 students attend those matinees, and we sold out. We sold out. Families come out to productions. It's a multi-generational experience. It is something that whole families can do together and passing on from generation to generation. There are new entertainment forms coming out, and certainly we talked about the fact that in the idea of the refitment for the 5 points, making sure that it does have the ability to stream. We have a lot of new music coming out and recordings coming out, and we have a lot of young artists, emerging artists, who are very interested in that and need the facilities, spaces, and the support to grow. So it absolutely is there, and there are a lot of youth continuing to participate, and parents looking for that opportunity.
And what I would add to that is, first of all, Julie talked about the shows that they've put on for youth and how successful they've been. She also could comment on the fact that the cast for some of those shows are young people as well, Julie?
Correct. So an entire production put on and worked behind the scenes by 10 to 18-year-olds only. So there are a lot of organizations in the city that are giving youth leadership in the arts and performing.
And in addition to that, when you get over into the area of instruments and orchestras and bands, they also have programs. In some cases, they have lending programs that they supervise through the library. In other cases, they mentor kids who come in for a number of sessions or practices, and they show them how to play instruments, and they challenge them to get better at using those instruments, and then they play a number of songs with them. In my own choir, Bravado, we have instituted Bravado Kids, and these kids will be in the ages of 10 to 16, and they will come and do a number of songs with us at one of our shows, and they will do choreography with us as well. And I have to tell you, they're pretty darn good. But of course, this is dance, this is expression, this is appearing before the public, and it's so valuable in so many areas in conducting themselves in later life when they have to do presentations and appear before meeting groups in their companies and whatever. And all these things are going on in our very community. It's very encouraging.
If I can just add to Councillor Harvey's question, I know Mr. Bell may have some data to add to your question, Councillor Harvey. Thank you.
Hello, thank you. Through you, Mayor, to Councillor Harvey. Just a couple of interesting points here that I think would help answer your question. We're not sure what's going to happen in the future with the trends that are happening, but we've certainly noticed a need for the theaters and the utilizing of the theaters. We already have over 200 bookings for the 5 Points Theater for this coming year of holds. We already have 58 holds for the Georgian Theater, and we're not even open that theater yet. So we've got a lot of interest and a lot of excitement surrounding that. And to the earlier comments surrounding e-games and the kids playing the games, that is an area that we are looking at and actually programming that way. And we do have certain e-gaming sporting events at the 5 Points Theater, and those are areas that we can grow and build on if we have a theater and an opportunity to have those that facility to do so. So a lot of great opportunities there, and we look forward to those options.
Great, thank you for the answers. It wasn't exactly what I was looking for, because I was trying to keep it short and concise to whether or not a third-party study existed to show the future over the next 10 to 20 years. I guess no pun intended, you danced around it. But like, I mean, as Councillor Harris knows, I'm a dance dad myself. I've slugged my share of dance props over the years, and but I was just looking at the trends, and I know e-gaming is a significantly growing trend that definitely could use this facility. My other question's in relation to the Barlow study. It just kind of caught my attention, again, not knowing a lot about the Barlow study, but I just thought it was a little peculiar to be relying on a 21-year-old study to recommend a multi-use facility. I was just wondering if somebody can expand on that, please.
Sure. Janice Barlow and Associates did a study in the year 2000, and I can't tell you that I've read it, but I've read a synopsis of it. She recommended a 1,200 seat theater, a 400 to 600 seat theater, and a multi-purpose room. And the reason we mentioned that is because you can start to see a bit of a continuum back at that period of time. In 2006, the Barrie Cultural Plan recommended 5 spaces, and they had it set out so that there were different size theaters all the way up to 1,200 as well. So our argument there was, if you look back even that far, you discover that what they were trying to do is plan ahead for the situation we now find ourselves in. When my wife and I first came to Barrie in 1976, it was the golden years. We had 1,000 seats at Fisher. We had 680 seats at Georgian, and those theaters were quite new in those days. And regrettably, what's happened over the years is that the availability of those seats has started to deteriorate, such that now we don't have Fisher, and all we've got is Georgian, and it's pretty dated. So the point of giving you a historical perspective was to show you that we really need to do something to take action, and the sooner the better. And even that isn't going to replace all the seats we've been using, but it would be a really good start.
Great. And then just one last question or comment. And this is me having to put my my council hat on, because obviously we're talking about a significant amount of money. And I still struggle about the 2 theater approach with the multi-use piece added to it. And has there been any discussion or consideration that doing the 1 main theater with your multi-use area and creating that multi-use area in such a fashion that it would have your second stage and use retractable seating similar to what Casino Rama uses, so that way that other area could either be used as a theater or it could be used as an open space for a practice, whether it's a dance competition or whatever venue has been renting it out.
Our view of that is that there's enough demand for the 3 spaces, and that if we fail to engage in those 3 spaces, we have a big problem. For example, if we didn't have the small theater, then there's about 8 community organizations like King Edward Choir, Lyrica, Barrie Concert Band, and so on, who won't have a venue to perform in. And secondly, there is so much potential for community uses for various groups, music studios, trade shows, community groups that celebrate all sorts of events like Hanukkah and Eid and Diwali, Barrie Music Festival, all those sorts of things, that there is too much demand to ignore the opportunity the 3 spaces provide. Moreover, the point was made a little bit earlier on, we don't build single-use ice rink facilities anymore. We build 2 rinks because we find if there's a competition in one rink, we still have the other rink to serve the community. So looking at all of those things, looking at the flexibility, for example, of the multi-purpose room, we would have stackable chairs and tables in there, and you could do just about anything with it. You could have a community meeting. You could have the orchestra doing a rehearsal in that multi-purpose room, which frees up the main stage. And, you know, the orchestra will tell you, well, we don't want chairs that have arms on them because we have to hold our instruments. So it functions as a total plan, a large stage for the touring groups. They're the ones that make the money and pay the bills, and deal with the larger groups in town that need a larger space like that. And then the smaller theater for the smaller groups in town that aren't going to fill 800 to 900 seats or even 600 seats. And then the multi-purpose room that gives an opportunity for rehearsals when the other rooms are engaged, and provides all the opportunities for all of the community groups, both instruments, singers, theater groups, and every other kind of possible community event that you can imagine that you could bring together. That's the way we looked at it.
Yeah, thank you. I do appreciate your answer. I guess my big concern with this too is the second theater that you're speaking of is a very similar size to that of the 5 Points. And even when Fisher was around with the 5 Points, we weren't seeing the usage to the level that it could handle. So I'm still struggling to understand that the usage is going to be at the level that that you're saying it will be. I'll leave my comments to that. Thank you.
Well, I can make one more response to that. The 5 Points, as it turns out, a couple of consultants have said this, it's an excellent incubator space. The type of thing you would think of is a small theater group of maybe 8 people that don't require a stage, don't require wings, don't require green rooms in the back, aren't making a lot of entrances and exits. Other small presentations, maybe lectures, that kind of thing. But that's a facility that has 110 fixed seats. Now, yes, you can pull some more seats out from the wall, but the minute you do that, you reduce your performance space to something, I think it's 15, I'm not going to remember that number, but it's something larger than a living room. So a large living room. So the problem with the 5 Points is that it has a very specific role and a very specific size. We're talking, well, and the other okay, so I'll carry on. We're talking about a larger room that will accommodate 350 people, that will be acoustically sound, and will have all the lights and other things that go with a theater stage. Now, it can accommodate the bigger productions of Theater by the Bay and Talk is Free Theater. The smaller ones can go into the 5 Points. And all of those other community groups like Lyrica and King Edward Choir that don't need 900 seats, but would like to have 350 people there. That's what the second theater would be ideally for. Plus, you got to worry about the Barrie Film Festival. 16,000 people a year attend the Barrie Film Festival. They put on showings every 2 weeks, all through the year. It's phenomenal to me. And they would pay $40,000 to be an anchor tenant at this facility. So this is going to fill a lot of seats and a lot of spaces.
Thanks, Mr. Chen. Great discussion here. Deputy Mayor Ward, I think you're up next with questions.
Thank you. And I only have one question really. And the emphasis of your and thank you for the presentation. The emphasis is certainly on local community groups using this theater. And I think that's right, because we are building this first and foremost for local groups to use. But of course, the other half of the equation is we're going to have hopefully have a lot of touring acts and touring groups that using this facility. And as Mr. Rattan just sort of suggested, they help pay the freight. You know, if we can sell out 1,000 seats or 900 seats for Steve Earle or somebody coming to town, then that helps to keep the cost down for everybody else. So I guess I was curious, and when you, if there's a sweet spot there, and when you're talking to your comparable communities, whether they've had a lot of luck bringing in those kind of acts. Are there a lot of acts out there touring that are going to take those dates?
Julie, do you want to handle that?
I can give an example. We did some research on that, and in fact, one of our members with Barrie Arts Alliance does do programming and books touring groups, and he indicated right away that he would absolutely be able to, if space was available, he would book the large theater at least twice a month, and he would book the 350 seat as well, fully anticipating, if it continues the way his other programming has gone when he takes them to Aurelia or elsewhere, that they would sell out. So you would have full capacity seating at the 800 or the 350, and then you have the full bar sales that go with it as well. And that was just one example of a local programmer who books commercial touring groups.
And I guess what I could add to that is I spent some time around Christmas before Omicron became as significant as it did, looking at the bookings at the Burlington Theatre and the St. Catharines, I should call them performing arts centers. And you can see the tours. There was Chantal Kreviatsik, singer, and I think Jan Arden, the Irish Rovers, if that's what you like to hear. They were going from theater to theater. There are rock groups as well. There are classical music groups. At one point, we were told by theater managers that you could book 3 to 6 a month. I think you can book even more than that. If you look at the Burlington stats there, they're doing very well in these touring commercial groups. And I think Barrie is on the map, but our facilities have been getting a little old and a little worn. And, you know, the difference between 700 seats at Georgian and 900 seats that we could go to in our main theater at $50 a ticket is $10,000. Now, if you're a promoter, you're looking at that $10,000 and you're saying, am I going to go here? Or am I going to go there? And if you're the city of Barrie, you're saying, hey, wait a minute, $10,000, that's another $10,000 in our downtown. Does it cost a bit more to build another 200 seats? Yes. But how many years does it take you to recover that? My guess would be 3 to 6 years, and you've got those extra 200 seats for a long time.
Thank you.
Thanks, Deputy Mayor Ward. Other questions for the task force? Councillor McCain.
Thank you, Mayor Lehman. And I guess maybe what I will do is direct my questions to Ms. Underhill and Mr. Rutten, as this will come up in a staff report. And I would like to maybe, throw some information, your questions your way and get your perspective. I guess, tonight, what is the outcome? What are you looking to achieve with council moving forward?
Well, I know that Councillor Harris will be putting forward, the motion will be discussed, but our interest is in going forward in that next part of the recommendation that we could move forward to go with the design process, looking at the scope, determining the capital, so that then we can go to the next point of moving into those fundraising pieces or applying for the grants. And I believe, and it might be Councillor Harris that can assist with that, but it is that opener to do the next part of the planning phase.
I do appreciate that, Ms. Underhill. And I mean, I do see on some notes that you're looking at proposed budget, capital budget implication, annual operating budget costing, but there isn't an amount, and there's a lot of information here, Councillor Harris, so maybe I'm missing that. Is there a dollar amount that you'll be asking for tonight?
Councillor Harris.
Yeah, thank you, Mayor Lehman. Thank you for the question, Councillor McCann. No, and what we're really looking to accomplish with the motion later is to keep the momentum moving forward. And this council has spent a fair bit of time with the theater item. And again, recognizing that we accepted the report to not move forward with the Fisher project. We've created a theater reserve, and we do have some capital projects that have been approved. Funds for moving this forward, the $200,000 for this year and $300,000 for next year, to kind of keep the work moving forward. So the motion will kind of speak to those items that need to happen to get us to the next steps of understanding this project better and ultimately the cost of the project.
Okay, so I will. I guess maybe I'll go further down the rabbit hole with you at the ask of the staff or your item. I just wanted to get the perspective of Ms. Underhill and Mr. Rutten here. So I may ask the same questions twice, but I just want to get the perspective of kind of I'm guessing our experts that are on the table right now. Okay, so whatever that ask is, obviously I would like to know what that ask is. And if it sounds like it's $200,000 this year, I'm saying probably money well spent, right? We need to raise a lot of money, and I am definitely supportive of the arts, but it's got to be a win-win-win for everybody in the city. Win for this organization, a win for the performing arts and the theater group in Barrie, and obviously a win for the city as a whole. So let's give you an idea where my mind is. So definitely want this to work. But I do have a couple other questions that maybe in this very extensive and long report, something that's always been on my mind, and maybe you can correct me if I'm right or wrong, or maybe give me a little clarity. But you talk about, having these, let's call them quote unquote big bang, performers that'll bring $10,000 maybe a night in revenue, plus. Tell me about Casino-Rama. I always thought that the big handcuff that we had in the city of Barrie was we weren't able to legally get these performers that were, let's say, the Big Bang, right? Because the Casino-Rama had it legally tapped in if they work in Casino-Rama that they can't perform anywhere between, I believe it's 100 miles or 100 kilometers from Rama. Do either one of you have any insight on that?
The only thing I can comment on, Councillor McCann, is that Casino-Rama taps into a very small portion of the entertainment industry. And there are many touring groups that go into the size of venues like the 800 to 900 seat or the 350. And we used to have some smaller facilities in Barrie and privately run that had some very high caliber musicians coming through, and we no longer have that. So it is a very different market field, and that's all I could say to it.
That's a good answer, actually. Mr. Rutten, do you have anything to add, or should I maybe ask Mayor Lehman if I could ask if Councillor Harvey has anything to add to that?
Well,
go ahead, Mr. Rattan. Yeah,
I'm not a promoter, so I don't know about those restrictions. I would simply point out that Casino-Rama has 5,000 seats and we have 900. And I would think if you're a big enough act, Ringo Starr and his all-star band isn't going to come to a 900-seat facility in the city of Barrie just because of the economics of it. Other than I don't know what the restrictions might be. So we're not going to go for that level of performer. But on the other hand, as I was looking through the selection of things at Burlington and St. Catharines, there's a lot of people I would go and see. We had Ron James at Georgian Theatre, but Sean Cullen and Just for Laughs and all those things were going through those communities and making money for those communities. It seems to me that there would be a lot of those sorts of acts that we could tap into that our citizens would be interested in seeing, and that would limit their trips to Toronto to see those same sorts of acts. So it depends on what's available out there. We just have to make a presentable area here for those folks to add us to their tours. That's what I would think.
Okay. Mayor Lehman, I was a little unorthodox. Was it possible that maybe Council Harvey could?
Yeah, Councillor Harvey, did you have something on this particular issue, or?
Yeah, thank you, Mayor Lehman. Yeah, actually, this exact discussion's come up at the Tourism Barrie board meetings in the past. It is a struggle for our city to be able to get some of these attractions that normally would go to Casino Rama, because they've got a stronghold with their contracts, and that there's a 50-kilometer radius drawn around the casino, and that's why we're really struggling getting similar type acts that they get, and also to those that would be of that caliber that don't necessarily have contractual matters with Casino Rama. Typically, they want to go into larger venues, which would then only be the Sadlin Arena that would be able to accommodate several thousand people.
Yeah, the Rama exclusion zone's really been an issue for the BMC. I don't think it's necessarily been an issue for the Georgian Theatre in the past, but certainly has been for the BMC. Go ahead, Councillor McCann.
Yeah, I appreciate that, Mayor, and thank you all for those answers. I guess I'm looking at my notes here. Well, actually, you mentioned the Savin Center, and I just wanted to maybe get your insight and maybe your thoughts on why maybe you haven't booked some events at the Savin Center, especially when you say your local programmer has the ability to attract, 2, let's say, big bang, performers a month. Is it because of the aesthetics, because of the look of the arena? Is that what's stopping performers coming here and maybe people purchasing tickets? Or is there something else why you wouldn't, capitalize on the Savin Center?
I would just say a couple of points to that I do know of. For some groups, it depends on the acoustics of the facility that they're coming into, and whether they come with all of their own sound system, or they work with the tech and support and the sound system within the facility. So there's some smaller performers or chamber works that come and they work with the sound system that is available in the facility. I would also say for our local community groups, it is a challenge because it is an acoustic challenge to go in there. So our symphony orchestra cannot play in there because it isn't acoustically appropriate and available for them to do that. Those are some of the points that came up with the Barrie Arts Alliance group as we were discussing. For a theater production, there are no wing spaces, there are no backstage change rooms, rehearsals, and when we do a performance, it's usually it can be a 2-week run, so we can't tear things down and put things back.
Okay, so
in between skating or
And I'll throw in my 2 cents. Acoustics is a big problem in a hockey arena because those sound waves bounce around and cancel each other out. So the Sadlin Arena is for amplified sound. The big organizations, the big rock groups, for example, come in with their own sound. They have those big towers that are worth hundreds of thousands of dollars, and they just create the sound that they need to do. That's why it doesn't work for community groups.
Okay, you know what? Great answers. I mean, these really are questions, that I have. I guess maybe another question that I have for you specifically is, this report is very extensive. You've put a lot of work and detail and resources into this report. I'm just wondering why that you didn't broaden the scope a little and maybe look at other locations that maybe obviously less money would be good, but more importantly, it's the experience that you're trying to have here. You've got 2 theaters that you're bringing in. I've got concerns with serious concerns with parking right in that area. And, actually, this isn't even my idea. It's another council member's idea that's on here that put the idea in my head that I thought would be a great one of another location that is in the downtown core. And I just wanted to get your insights. I know you're selling, the central location, and I'm asking you to comment on another location, and that's not what you want to do. But it's a question that needs to be answered in depth for me to get my support. And just please understand, I want this to work. I am in favor of the theater. So I just need you to know that I want this to be a success. I want to set this up for success. And these are questions that a lot of taxpayers are going to have who maybe don't attend theater, right? And quite frankly, hopefully questions that theater goers do have. So I won't mention the building, but there's a building in downtown that would be, in my opinion, ideal for this. Hopefully you understand where I'm going with that location. Why is this not in the scope? And would you, and this maybe goes after you answer, two of you please, maybe let's go to Jim Harris or Councillor Thompson, is would you put another location in the scope?
Actually, I'll go to the task force chair because I know Councillor Harris, dealing with the location question is one of the first things you did as a task force. So maybe winding back to that discussion, you can just talk about why the focus on the central location.
Yeah, thank you, Mayor Lehman, and thanks for the question, Councillor Buchanan. Happy, obviously, to have Councillor Thompson jump in. Yeah, location obviously is something that we considered at the beginning, recognizing that the scope of the work was really to determine what a performing arts center should have in this city. The site that has been performing arts center for generations now has served this city, and also is part of what we see as a bookend for the west end of the downtown. So there's certainly lots of advantages to using the site that was that of the Fisher and connecting to the West End Task Force revitalization, being downtown. One thing we did learn, and I appreciate your parking concern, is we did learn, obviously expected, but it was reaffirmed that the advantage of a theater to downtown businesses, especially restaurants and bars, is people park once. So when you go to the theater and you go for dinner, you park and you walk to the theater. So parking is, when we considered parking, it was based on theater goers' travels and how they manage their evening. We considered the parking in the downtown. Certainly having parking on site is important for accessibility and obviously for convenience, but the theater experience in many cases involves an experience in the downtown, and people don't park for dinner and then drive over to a theater. They experience the downtown, and we also know that that's something we want to encourage, obviously, is the vitalization of our downtown. Maybe at that point I can hand it over to Councillor Thompson if you want to add something, Councillor Thompson.
Thanks, Councillor Harris. Through you, Mayor Lehman, to Councillor McCann. So actually, we did some extensive research on other locations, and we even felt that we delayed a week on making a final just to revisit other sites. And a lot of it had to do with, we own this site as a city, which would help us spend more money on the interior and the important things in a theater than going and selling the land and then trying to purchase land, where this was like a good fit. And as to Councillor Harris's point, this is iconically our theater block, where we've kind of had the theater there for generations. So it was kind of a perfect fit in that sense. And I know the building you're speaking of, which is a private owned business. So we couldn't start on a task force on hoping somebody would be willing to sell their property. We were, tasked to look at what the city's needs and the community and our arts community needs, and this is what we did. And like I said, it wasn't something we took lightly. We actually spent a few meetings on the location.
Councillor McCann?
I don't know, Ms. Underhill's and Mr. Rutten's expertise, but I definitely, these are questions I would ask, in the discussion. But do you have any insight or anything you'd like to add to that? No.
we felt the same way. We got very excited about the point that building in the West End and creating this longer access to arts and culture, because at the other end we have the art gallery. You move through to the 5 Points, you move on to the West End, and where there is a lot of history as well. We were excited to move forward with that space.
Okay, well, I definitely, I appreciate the answer. I didn't really get what I was looking for, but I will maybe ask a few more questions when the end discussion comes up. I think that's all the questions that I have.
Okay.
Yeah, it is. Thank you.
All right, and members of General Committee, we will get to the motion right after we complete questions of the task force. So others who have questions of the task force. Any other questions for the members of the task force? Okay, I'm really just going to add one very general question, because it gives, I suppose, the task force an opportunity to make a closing argument. And while you're on the screen, I really appreciate, I wanted to add my appreciation to that of Councillor Harris's. This, I know, began as a bright idea in the mayor's head to have a task force to look at this issue, and ballooned into an enormous amount of work. But the degree of energy, both in the community as a response to your consultation, and as well obvious in the work that the task force did, is I think Councillor Morales got it right. It's confidence inspiring. So I guess the general question I would ask and ask you to answer for those watching in council is, why do you think now is the right time for this project? I mean, Mr. Rattan, you I remember the Barlow report. I was a young man. And it's 21 years since a 1,200 seat theater was first recommended for the city of Barrie. It's never been done. I think you've given us many reasons in your presentation, but if you were to, you'd be standing in the line at Tim Hortons and somebody says to you, why on earth should Barrie spend all this money on a performing arts facility right now? Why would you say this is the time? And same question to you, I guess, Ms. Underhill.
Well, I'll start. Thank you, Mayor Lehman, for the question. I will say a couple of things. As difficult as this has been in the last 2 years and going through COVID, we know we will come out of it. We know every time that there has been a break and restrictions, we are sold out. I was fortunate enough to get on stage in November to a sold out audience, and just waiting to get back live again. It is happening all the time. We know that 100 years ago, the pandemic, it took 4 years for arts and culture, live performing arts, to come back to where it was before, but it did come back. And it is an important part of our lives. We do know that often coming out of these difficult times like this, we will see opportunities from federal supports that to help revitalize, and the performing arts area has been hit very hard globally, and is often the last to receive support. And we're seeing that right now in Canada. So we're confident and optimistic that that support is going to be there. So if we start working now, in 5 years' time, we will have that new performing space. We will have gone through the fundraising process and the capital infrastructure grant writing process, because all of that goes alongside the actual construction. I can tell you that the BAA, never before has Barrie had so many arts groups working together who actually fully understand each other's needs and go together. We've worked very hard on this, and I would say I was part of the 2017 work, and even when we were looking at the Fisher Auditorium. And I can honestly say that all our organizations did not understand each other, and the requests and the asks were all over the map. And I would say now, when the task force was asked for the scope and the Barrie Arts Alliance, we had to go from the wants to the needs. And we did. So this facility, the wants started even more, and we narrowed down and really listened to each other and understood how we could work together. And so I do think, as difficult as this time is, it is the right time, and it's very exciting. And I think you only have to look to probably the high number of viewership tonight, because there are a lot of people interested in seeing where this is going. And that's all I can say for it.
And all I can add to that is I think the timing is now critical. Too many things have been lost. The Barrie Film Festival no longer has a home. Yes, they've tried to do some work at Cineplex. Nothing bad about Cineplex, but there are distributorship agreements there. They can't get the screen time they would like to have. So they have a problem. We're very grateful to have Georgian Theatre. It does have limitations. The Huronia Symphony Orchestra can't fit in Georgian Theatre. The stage isn't big enough. Even Bravado and KCP, when we put on our shows, we have to put our band up on scaffolding because the stage isn't big enough. I'm happy to have it. I'm not complaining. Please don't take it away. But it does have limitations. And there are other community groups. King Edward Choir doesn't sing there because they've been too big in the past. They couldn't fit. Beyond that, I could tell you a little story if you want to hear it about a wonderful church that we've put on performances in. We booked 4 nights. So we had a tech rehearsal on Wednesday night, a dress rehearsal on Thursday night. And that was after we'd taken 2 pews out, moved about 40 choir chairs, and dismantled the altar and took it down the hall to store it. And that's before we got ready for the performance. That's just the preparation of the site. And then they came to us on the Friday morning, the day of the first show, and they said, somebody died. You got to put it all back. We got to do a funeral. Well, who do you blame for that? It's a church first. That's its mission in life. It's a performance space only second through the goodness of their generosity. And when you've lived through a number of those things, you say, gee, it'd be nice to have a stage. So that's the other part of the problem. We're getting too big for this kind of stuff. We really need facilities that you can perform to your full ability, do your choreography, do your singing, play your instruments, whatever it is. And we're going to be even bigger in a few years. And I'm not sure what you're going to say to the citizens and the jobs and the people you want to attract when they look around. You got lots of recreation centers. We're okay on that score. I use them. I'm happy about that. But performing arts centers, there you are.
Thank you very much. I'll give the last word to Jim Harris.
Thank you, Mayor Lehman. And again, I can't thank Chuck and Julie enough for representing the full committee tonight and do such an incredible job. And again, thanks to all the committee for all the work that went into this. And again, Councillor Rietma, who did an incredible amount of work with the user group and going to all, I think Councillor Rietma went to all of the theater visits and helps. Yeah, all 4, and which was incredibly valuable. And going to communities of similar size to Barrie, who have gone through this exercise, who have done all those things before us and provided an incredible amount of lessons learned. Here's what worked well. Here's what we would do differently. But every single one of them were grateful that they had gone through the exercise and came out the other end with a performing arts center for their community. And, and again, maybe final closing, you asked about why now, Mayor Lehman, and, we recognize now that now more than ever, the performing arts is important. And clearly the investment in the well-being of our community, we see the numbers. We know the Performing Arts Center provides economic investment and wins for our community, and there's no question. But also the health and well-being of the arts is also, there's no question in that. And we recognize, obviously, and think of groups that have been impacted, our seniors and our young people, our children, and there's clear benefits for both in the performing arts. So this is a community investment, and it will be enjoyed by the full community. So thank you again to all the committee for all the work. It's been an incredible journey, And we look forward to this momentum continue to move forward. And thank you to council for all the questions and interest. It's been greatly appreciated.
All right. Well, thank you very much. And we will now immediately move to discussion of that motion, which is about the next steps on the project. So thank you, Mr. Rattan and Ms. Underhill, particularly for tonight and for all your work, and of course to the other members of the task force. And let's get to the motion. And with that, the mayor has forgotten who held it. I think it might have been Councillor Congo. Yeah, okay. Councillor Congo, would you care to put it on the floor and kick us off with discussion of the motion?
Thank you, Mayor Lehman. I'd be pleased to put the item on the floor. I don't have much more to add, and I'm not sure, but I will add one thing and maybe a quick question for staff. I do want to share something that came in from a 13-year-old resident, and I've heard a lot about this today. As I believe Ms. Underhill was speaking, people are watching. This has caused a lot of excitement. And if I can share, it was expressed to me about how important the theater is, that this individual shared as a 13-year-old. Self-confidence growth is absolutely beneficial. It's a safe place that helps mental health and a place to let you have your heart and soul live without judgment. So I thought a beautiful expression coming from one of our youth involved in theater. I'm happy to support the motion. I thank the committee. I did have one question of staff, and I'm not sure if you can speak to it now, but recently we spoke about our council's investment in the sponsorship staff position. And we've had a recent conversation around sponsorship, the pilot, and different conversations around that. Seeing that the task group has put forward in part of the recommendation as a report, the importance of a fundraiser and fundraising opportunities, can staff speak to at this time how those roles and scopes would work together, and where this type of theater might fall within sponsorship versus fundraising? So I'm assuming there's great synergy and alignment. We've got a sponsorship strategy and program in place that could benefit this should council support it moving forward. But I thought I would just ask because we've been having conversations about both fundraising and sponsorship. So I'm not sure if that would be Ms. James Reed, if she could speak to that at all.
Yeah. Ms. James Reed.
Thank you for the question, Councillor Kungle. I think maybe I would start and I would ask if Stephanie Schlichter would like to add in. We haven't had detailed conversations about that, so I think it's something that we need to have pending council's discussion today. But certainly the fundraising portion of this would be much separate to the sponsorship. And I think perhaps in a further report back, we could give more detail, but I would invite Stephanie, if she's on the line, to add anything else in.
Ms. Schlichter. And we may need to add her to the call. I'm not sure.
Sorry for the delay. I was just added to the call. Thank you, Mayor Lehman, and through you, Councillor Kungle. And I would echo the comments from Ms. James Reed in that fundraising for a theatre would certainly be a very niche and specific. However, I think in terms of some of the value principles, there may be some opportunities, but that would certainly be something that we'd have to take back and explore further.
That's great. Thank you. No further questions. And well done, Ms. Schlichter. I know you've been involved in this from the very beginning days, so my compliments to you.
Thanks, Councillor Kungle. On the motion, further comments? Councillor Thompson.
Thank you. Through you, Mayor Lehman. A little bit of a comment. I know Julie and Chuck were a little bit nervous about presenting, and they hit it out of the park. They really showed the importance of a theater to this community. And I know some councillors have concern about the price tag, which granted, and that's not what this motion is. This is just to keep the momentum, get professionals to take a look, and then start that process, which there'll be an opportunity with a price tag and funding and footprint and stuff. But I think we've got to look at this. We all talk about a great city, and you know, We've approved 200 million in rec centers. Well, this is the rec center for our arts community. And, you know, this is what they need. And, you know, I belong to the Barrie Public Art, and I never thought I would, you know, I'm not really a theater goer. And I tell you, the passion in this task force is like second to none. And, you know, you look at the answers and the research, like spin-off task force, and they were like all over it. It was incredible to be part of this. So I understand, and, you know, we think of this as more of a want, but it's truly a need. And it's at that point, you know, where we build rec centers. We have rec centers, and we're talking about building 2 more. We don't have a theater. And I would hate to get hung up at this stage. We've got to let this process continue. And, you know, a little bit of a teaser on fundraising. We were able to save skids of bricks from the Fisher, which we will incorporate in the new build. And it was a discussion with Councillor Reitman that we were able to save those, and thanks to Mr. Hughes for doing that. So, you know, some of the sentimental of, you know, our theater, and I'll tell you, those Central alumni are fierce. So I think this is a great thing. So I hope council supports this. And I'm actually glad it was held and it just didn't pass, because it gave me the opportunity. And Julie's laughing because I promised if it went on consent, I would give jazz hands and sing. So, so I appreciate it. So like I said, I hope council can support it, as we're not approving the build of anything. It's just the momentum going forward to see what great theater we can build. Thank you.
Thanks, Councillor Thompson. Councillor Reitman.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor, and I really did want to hear Councillor Thompson sing. But I want to say thank you for inviting me to be on this task force, because it was a terrific experience. I went to 4 theaters, and a lot of my committee members went with me. And I can tell you that, you know, from a person that walks into a theater to see a show, it's a bit like an iceberg, you know. You only see a wee little bit of this building. There is so much in the background that has to be there to make it work and to work really well. It's just amazing. And I think the working group and the task force has really put a lot of effort into pulling together a scope for a building that really will work well and will serve the needs of this city. And Mr. Mayor, we really need one of these buildings. We need a performing arts center, because we are in the process of building a great city. And we're at that stage now where we definitely need a performing arts center. And it's going to bring tourism dollars into the city. It's going to do wonders for our downtown economically. But more importantly, I think it gives our performing arts groups, be they local or touring, and our youth, a real opportunity to experience the arts. And let me say as well that, you know, there are a lot of soccer players and pickleball players that also go to the theater. And I think that's the kind of city that we need to encourage and support. And so I'm delighted with this motion. It moves this project forward. We have the money already approved in the budget for this year. And I'm really looking forward to see what comes out of this motion in 6 months or a year, whenever this work gets done. I'm just really keen to see what the building will look like. And I acknowledge that there's going to be issues about money. But I think Councillor Thompson and his group really started us off on the really right foot. And I'm very confident that with the excitement that I've seen in this organization and this city on this topic, money's no object. We'll get her done.
Thanks, Councillor Riedma. Other comments? Councillor Natalie Harris.
I'm through you, Mayor Lehman. This is one of the best presentations and reports I've gotten. I'm so excited by all of this. I'm just a full yes. This is the pros seem to outweigh any concerns that we can address in the future. Yes, the dollar signs will come later, but there's just so much benefit to this, and it's sad that we aren't there yet, but let's just keep working forward. And the work that went into this is just so evident. You guys went to the theaters, you went and you looked, and you were boots on the ground doing everything you needed to bring this type of a report back. And it really shows in the quality of it. So thank you.
Great comments. Thanks, Councillor Harris. Any others who wish to comment on the motion that's on the floor? Councillor McCann.
Thank you, Mayor Lehman. And I guess maybe I'm going to duplicate some of my my questions. And I guess the sponsor was Councillor Jim Harris, representing the Performing Arts Task Force. I mean, I obviously am very aware of the enthusiasm that, everyone, if not everyone on this committee has, and obviously that's reflected in your presentation. And I think that everybody obviously sees that there is a need for a performance arts, center in Barrie. I'm just a little curious that I've never seen an ask from council without actually having a dollar amount, right? And I know I asked this question earlier and I got the answer, we've got the money and we're raising. So I'm just curious why there wasn't a dollar amount put in for the consultant. Would be really my first question. And like, I'm not trying to stop momentum either, but I just want to be like fiscally responsible here, right? And I'm just curious why there's no dollar amount. So maybe that's my first question.
Councillor Thompson.
Thanks, Mayor Lehman, and not to jump in on Councillor Jim Harris's work as the chair, but the reason why, Councillor McCann, there was no amount. So the motion is to get a professional. So we had a report before, but things have changed, costs and stuff with trying to build like net zero buildings and stuff like that. So there's no way we could have a cost. So we didn't want to bring forward a number because if it's too low or too high, it's a bad optics. So this is to move it to where a professional is going to come back and say, this is what with all your recommendations and, a conceptual drawing and like multi-purpose room, 1 theater, 2 theaters, whatever the professional says, then there'll be a cost to it where like, and I understand your concern, like with no cost, you don't want to approve something, but we need to do this stage to get to that stage to have a real true number that we can stick with.
Back to me, Marilyn?
Yeah, go ahead, Councilman McCann.
Yeah. Okay. I appreciate that answer. I think that with the members on your task force, I know quite many of them, and I just find it hard to believe that you can't put a budget towards a consultant. We're not reinventing a wheel here. This has been done in all the other cities you mentioned in your presentation, like Burlington, like St. Catharines, et cetera, et cetera. So I'm just curious why you've just left it open-ended. And maybe if Jim Harris, if you could add, and if there isn't an answer, then I'll accept that and move on to my next question.
Sorry, Councilman McCann, let me just clarify. Are you asking what the dollar amount is for the whole project, or are you just asking what the budget is for the consultant?
Well, I see on item 4, proposed budget, capital budget implications of annual operating budget costing. and it doesn't give an amount to how much you're going to spend for the consultants. So there's $2.5 million, I believe, in that theater reserve. And, you know, I would hate to think that we're going to spend $2.5 million on a consultant.
No. It was actually, we just approved it actually in the budget. I think it's 200,000, but Councillor Jim Harris, is that correct? The money for the consultant's already been approved, I think, in the amount of 200,000, right?
Yeah, 200,000 for this year, and there's 3,000 for next year, which was this year's budget, but it's in the plan. And I saw Councillor Eatman want to jump in, so happy to.
I was just going to say exactly what you said, Councillor Harris. We've approved 200,000 in the budget, and in the capital program next year is 300,000. And the intention is that the 200,000 would be used for the consultants to do the work that we need to have done.
Okay, yeah, I mean, I'm not sure why it's not in the staff report, but I guess that's something we did in budget, and you know what, I guess I've forgotten that. So that's clear. It's a $200,000 consultant fee that we're going to have for this year. And in that consultant fee, everything listed above is going to be put in there. Okay, I mean, just as maybe a frame for future, item discussion, it would be nice if that was actually in the report, just for less confusion. So I mean, I am definitely in support of spending $200,000 on this consultant, but maybe I would ask Councillor Harris, this would be, well, before we move to the next stage, I would want to see other options in the city of Barrie. I mean, I do agree that we need a performance arts, and I do believe that we need a theater, but you've now changed the game, you've changed the format, you've changed the model from what we were talking about only months ago, and now you're adding another theater. And quite frankly, I'm seriously concerned about the parking, and having a report back with this consultant that you hire and looking at other alternatives to maybe have two locations or have one location, a different location. I just think that's proper management for a decision. And I feel like I'm being a negative guy in this discussion. I'm not. I'm trying to set this up for success, but I just find it bizarre that you're using only one location when clearly there's another location that other council members have thought about that I think would be a great fit too. Maybe not as glamorous, but inside could be just as spectacular. So I guess I'm asking you, Councillor Harris, since this is your item discussion, would you include a secondary location for a preliminary for the consultant to weigh in on a secondary location for either both theaters or one theater?
Councillor Harris?
Yeah, thanks, Councillor McCann. Yeah, I think, part of the effort in the motion is to, gather the information to consolidate what we've put together as a task force. So, here's the recommendations, and as we look at getting the consultants to really drill down, we can get those answers. And as far as the location, as far as the task force recommendation moving forward, this is a location that continuing to move around about and go back into the possibility of a renovation. We rejected the renovation as council based on the staff report that we not renovate the theater that we had. And so, that's really not in the recommendations or scope. If there's things in the recommendations that come out as far as the placement of other theaters, second theaters as Barrie grows, and, I don't want to, get ahead of myself, that's a possibility, but certainly, we want to make sure that the recommendations that we've received that have been, and again, I as a chair, I get people offer me suggestions for locations and this and that, and it's wonderful. There's lots of people who think it should be here and there and other places, but Councillor Thompson mentions some we don't own, some may not be for sale, but we do have a site that has worked, that does fit with the overall plan for the West End and to bookend the downtown. And so there's no concern, and I appreciate Chuck and Julie answering the question on behalf of the Barrie Arts Alliance and the theater community that this site works. They're excited to move forward. So, we seem to have consensus. That was one of the first things we did. This as a community, a committee, are we good with this site? Let's look at the other options. And we came back to this site, and there was no concern from our theater community about this site. We checked in with the West End Task Force, some members, and again, similarly supportive of the site. So that piece, no, to be honest, the answer would be no. But certainly as far as the next piece of work, really clarifying and detailing the recommendations, we expect all that to happen, and we're excited to get that work going. So, you know, I read a quote the other day: "We can't leave a place unless we first arrive." And, you know, I think this extra work will help ensure that we all arrive, so then we can make that next step together in understanding what's best for the next step for a community, performing arts center. Hope that answers your question.
Yeah, you know, Councilor Harris, you did. And, you know, I've trained many salespeople in my life. And one of my theories is if you chase two rabbits, you're going to catch none. And so I guess I'm trying to get you to chase another rabbit here. So I actually respect that you want to focus on this location and see the concepts. I just don't know, maybe you could give me a suggestion. Where do you think that my curiosity, my intuition said there's maybe another location that I think would be fantastic, you know, closer into the downtown? Where do you see myself getting that information? Is it having an item discussion after this report, or is it, you suggest that maybe I put an item discussion up in the next 2 weeks and see if council wants to have a separate report on another location? Like I say, I am trying to set this up for success, but I do feel strongly about another location that I'd like more information on. And so where do you see me getting that information and seeing if council has an appetite to move forward with that as well?
To be honest, I don't know where you get that information. I mean, the information that we had available through us, through city staff, looking at locations that were available, viable, you know, we ended up where we began, which it was good. So, you know, I don't know if I have the answer for the question as far as, you know, like vetting other locations at this point. You know, that's not part of our recommendation. So I'm at a loss as how I would suggest moving forward with that potential endeavor.
Well, I appreciate that. And let me just give you, hopefully you don't mind my directness, but I work well people being direct with me, and I like to be direct with people. You are going to get my support tonight on moving forward. I definitely, like say, want this to be a success. I definitely think the theater group, you know, Barrie's an amazing city. And the reason why we're so amazing is because the people who live in this city and our people care, right? And so definitely as a counselor, I care about the theater group. I actually go to theater. I mean, you know, I enjoy some theater, right? And I definitely will be attending this theater where that's at. But I just want to do what's right. And I want everybody to win here. So I will hound you a little bit later on, Councilor Harris, offline, because I'm not going to let this go, and I need to get my answers. Okay, thank you.
Thanks, Councilor McCann. Anyone else want to comment on the motion that's on the floor? Councilor Harvey.
Thank you, Mayor Lehman. I am supportive of this also. I just have one question of clarity when it comes to this consultant and the report that they'll be coming back with. Obviously, looking at another site, as per the questions from Councilor McCann, is not something within the scope, but what direction is going to be provided to this consultant? Are you guys 100% hung on this 2 theater and an amenity space, or is this going to be left in the hands of the professional when they come back with their report?
I'll go to Ms. Schlichter on that, because I think the direction would be for staff in her department to hire the consultant and oversee the contract.
Thank you, Mayor Lehman, through you to Councillor Harvey. The intent of the first part of the motion is to hire a consultant. The scope of work would be to review the recommendations that have come from the Performing Arts Task Force, and to do that in context with the report work that has already been done, and in that operational lens. So taking the user lens and marrying it with an operational lens to determine a scope of work for concept. So in terms of a 1 theater or 2 theater, I think that would be part of that work to assess the overall needs and what those alternatives could be. So in terms of site location, we don't, that's something that if you wanted us to look at something different, we would require council direction to do that. But the scope itself for 1 or 2 theaters is something that we would have that consultant look at as part of operationalizing the recommendations.
Great, thank you for that response. And as Councillor Rietma said, I too am not happy that we're not getting a chance to listen to Councillor Thompson sing.
I don't know about that, Councillor Harvey, but there would have been entertainment value for sure, no question. Anyone else want to comment on the motion? Okay, a couple of things I wanted to say, and I really appreciated the last 2 hours here, folks. First of all, the presentation, and then the quality of questions and discussion among members of council. It's very, very clear. I mean, I've been in and around this issue since I was Ward 2 councillor in 2006. It came in, and we were having conversations then as part of the cultural plan. And there has never been the level of alignment, enthusiasm, or to be frank, a sense of urgency around this project than I've seen tonight. And that is really rewarding to see. So, and I congratulate the task force, but Barrie's broader cultural community for that, because you really have, I think, pulled together in over the last little while on this. Just a couple of comments I think that I wanted to make, because to me, it's urgent that we go forward from here and be clear. We're picking a site, and the task force has worked for 8 months, considered that question, considered the alternatives. It's time for us to get building. And, you know, that is not to say there aren't very important steps. There's a critical issue here around external funding that's going to be required, and it's not going to happen overnight. There's a huge amount of work ahead, but you can only do that work. And I like the reference to 2 rabbits. That's the point. It's time to stop chasing rabbits. It's time to decide that we're going to pursue this project on one site with one vision. And when the costs come back, we can talk about what that means. And when we talk about the functioning of it, we can talk about what that means. But it's time to get moving, I think. And I think, you know, this was first identified, as noted in the Barlow report 21 years ago. So it is at a time when Barrie had less than 100,000 population. Now we're over 150. And Chuck talked about in his presentation the growth that's coming to our city. And that's part of the confidence I have now, that there's no question that there's a demand for this facility, where once there might have been a question that said only, are we big enough? Do we have enough groups? Are we really going to have enough days booked for this to be a success? There's no question in my mind anymore around the answer to that question. Burlington's example is probably the best to point to if we want a real world example. And Sergio referred earlier to the confidence that inspires. You know, the audience in that facility doubled in its first 4 years to over 100,000 people. And through, as that chart showed, a number of different channels for bookings. A couple of things. I think the location piece, you know, the spin-off impact is the reason why this must be, to my mind, in the west end of our downtown. And we have such a great opportunity because of the ownership of the lands at Barrie Central. Aside from the fact that it's where Fisher used to be, that's great. But, you know, moving forward, it happens to be, I think, the perfect location for our city on so many levels. You want to maximize the spin-off impact. And when you talk to the president of Georgian College around the Georgian Theatre, she will be quick to tell you one of the biggest problems is we're unable to have the same kind of theater experience in our city because the Georgian Theatre is in the middle of Georgian's campus. You can't walk from dinner to the theater. You can't go out afterwards for a beverage, or you can't do any shopping or have that broader downtown experience that's going to be possible if we build on this site. And that $4 million economic impact straight into the west end of our downtown is just so powerful, just on the economic front. So if for no other reason than the economic impact, I think this is exactly the right location and exactly the right time, because here we are coming out of COVID. And it has been an incredibly difficult time for the restaurant sector. It still is. They're closed today as we're talking about this. And so to say to our downtown restaurant community, where 100 of the 400 restaurants are in Barrie and most of our independent restaurants, to say to them, we are going to invest in this project. We are going to bring the crowds of theater going, of restaurant going patrons and tourists into our downtown. What a great message to give to a sector so hard hit by COVID. I know the dollars will be a question at a future date. I just want to make one point about them tonight, and that is that Council had the foresight to put $2.5 million a year into a theater reserve. And I suppose the magic around that number is that it happens to carry 20 million in debenture if we were to go that route out of the reserve without touching taxpayer funding, because this is funded by our elected dividends. And Council made the choice when we debated the long range financial plan to preserve these funds for exactly this kind of project, for strategic investment in our own people, which is what investing in the arts is. It's investing in our people, and it's investing in our economy. And so I think, the day will come when we wrangle over the price tag and discuss what we like and what we don't about that. But I will tell you that I'm confident that both the fundraising piece, which has been identified here, and the funding piece that Council has already earmarked are a tremendous head start. And if we give this project the momentum it should have out of a night like tonight, that fundraising I know will be successful. I guess I just wanted to say, this project, was identified in previous reports, and our building a plan for culture in 2008. We made a conscious decision in Barrie that was quite different than other cities our size. Other cities our size built, like the Rose Theatre in Brampton or the Living Arts Centre in Mississauga, to present large shows. We said in Barrie, we're going to build our own cultural industry. We're going to build up our own performing groups. And look what those groups have done. Look at what the Barrie Film Festival's done. Look at what KCP and Bravado and Taka's Free Theatre and Theatre by the Bay have done. Look at what the HSO has done. They've grown their audience. And the reason we built the 5 Points Theatre 10 years ago was to incubate some of those groups. But the point was to incubate them to the point where they would need this facility. And here we are. So if we didn't have a sense of urgency around it, boy, Chuck, you hit it in like slide number 2 with the number of seats we've lost. And if there wasn't the urgency before, boy, there should be now around the fact that here we are, city of 150,000, aspiring to be one of the country's leading cities. We certainly are, but we are missing this piece. And it really can't come soon enough in terms of the opportunity to build a project for our city. But ultimately, I guess the last thing I wanted to say is, when we invest in the arts and culture, and when we invest in a facility like this, we're doing it for our people, for their expression, for their mental health, for them to practice their craft, for them to have the stage that they deserve for their talent. And ultimately, that's the piece that I think we got to remember about a project like this. All of the other things are important. We can't forget about any of them. But ultimately, the reason for these projects is to invest in our people because we believe in their talent. And so I think the time's come for this. And I'm really pleased at the task force's work. I'm just delighted that there's so much enthusiasm tonight. So I'm going to support it if you hadn't guessed that. And I'll call the question on the motion that's on the floor. Those in favor, please indicate. Is anyone opposed? None. That carries unanimously. Thank you again so much to the members of the task force for all of your work. It will be up at council next week for final approval, but thank you again to all of you for great work. All right, so having had that discussion, it seems like a come down to move into inquiries, but I believe that's where we are. Madam Clerk, have I missed anything?
No, we are in inquiries now.
Okay, inquiries of staff. I will go to you, Deputy Mayor Ward. Do you have any inquiries of staff?
I have none.
Members of General Committee, do you have any inquiries of staff? No inquiries. Announcements, Deputy Mayor Ward.
I have none.
Councillor Thompson.
Actually, Mayor Lehman, I don't know if I missed an email, but didn't Deputy Mayor Ward have something on the agenda?
We're talking about the item for discussion?
Yeah.
It went on consent.
Sorry, I had technical issues at the beginning.
Yes, yeah,
sorry.
You were, sorry, that's right. Yeah, we were just a minute late joining and we'd already approved it on consent.
I apologize.
It's not good an idea. I agree. Any other announcements? Anyone else with announcements? Okay, I do have a few. First of all, effective January 18th, 2022, residents who receive a parking ticket, paid parking areas in the city of Barrie can have the ticket canceled if they provide a proof of purchase with a receipt from a Barrie restaurant, an amount equal to or greater than the set fine within 5 days of receiving the ticket. And congratulations to Councillor Gary Harvey, who got Rick Mercer's attention with his good idea here. So amazing, lots of response to this excellent program. And thank you, Councillor Harvey, for bringing it forward. If you do wish to submit a receipt and try and get your ticket canceled, it's enforcement.services@barrie.ca. In partnership with arts organization Mural Roots, the city is offering a series of mural making workshops for Simcoe County artists. You can learn more about this series at barrie.ca/workshops or register at muralroots, that's all one word, .ca/Barrie workshops. The City of Barrie's annual I Love Barrie contest, now open for entries and students from kindergarten to grade 12. Welcome to express what's special about the city by sharing artwork, a short story, or a photo. Contest entries can be submitted online at barrie.ca/mybarrie. And I believe we've extended the deadline on this, if I'm not mistaken. Ms. James Reed, my notes show the old deadline, but I think we've extended it.
Yes, Mayor Lehman, that's correct. It's been extended until February 28th.
February 28th, perfect. Okay, thank you very much for that. Interestingly, also on the announcements tonight, we're accepting applications for our Arts and Culture Investment Program, formerly named the Cultural Grants Program. All arts and culture organizations are encouraged to apply. The deadline for the applications to that program is January 31st. That's next Monday. I've been asked to remind everybody to not place their garbage bins or to place their garbage bins out of the path of snow removal equipment. Often a mistake you only make once. I remember making that mistake. I got to pick up stuff for a while. We obviously don't want to create a mess for anybody or end up in an unsafe or awkward reach for our collectors. The on-street parking restrictions are in effect, obviously, until March 31st for snow clearing. The city's transit terminal at 24 Maple Avenue is available as a warming center for at times when temperatures are below -20. But also in good news, of course, the warming center at Ann and Dunlop or nearby there, run by the John Howard Society, has opened for overnight, and there is daytime warming offered through one of our downtown churches as well. Okay, circulation list items. Any comments regarding the circulation lists? January 17th, first of all, 2 weeks ago, or last week's circulation list. Okay, seeing none, how about tonight's, January 24th? Okay, seeing none, this completes the general committee meeting. Councillor Harvey?
Yeah, actually, thank you, Mayor Lehman. I wasn't sure if you're going to mention this or not, but I think it's definitely worth mentioning to congratulate Alex Massey for winning a gold medal at the World Para Snow Sports Championship in Norway over the weekend. And he'll also be participating in the upcoming Paralympics in China. Just thought it was definitely fitting to highlight him. And I was trying to scramble to get the information quick enough because I wasn't sure if you were going to mention it.
Oh, that's great. Thank you very much, Councillor Harvey. Yeah, I made mention of it on social media. It's Ali's story, his whole story is just absolutely remarkable, of course, in terms of overcoming his injury and becoming a world champion. But to finally reach that gold, incredible moment for the whole Massey family, and it certainly continues to make Barrie proud. So thank you for mentioning that, Councillor Harvey. Okay, if no comments on the circulation list, it completes this general committee's meeting. Madam Clerk, I know we need to just reconvene from the previous meeting. Is that back on the old link, or do we stay on this one?
Mayor Lehman, you can adjourn this meeting and we'll jump back onto the old link. I recirculated it to everybody at the beginning of this meeting, and we will resume closed session.
Okay, I will give us just a 5-minute break, just if anybody needs that. So we will reconvene. Actually, we'll make it 7 minutes since it's 9:13. So at 9:20, we will reconvene the meeting that was adjourned from 5 o'clock on the other link. To the public, thank you for watching tonight, and good night. We will see you for council next week.